I'm gonna go ahead and jump in. So I want to talk about today. Stop playing follow the leader. And you're probably like, what does that mean? And I follow the Lord, and that's amazing. But I'm more so talking about stop playing follow the leader when it comes to purpose and what you feel as if though God has called you to do. So I'm an advisor for one of the organizations on campus, and they have meetings every other Monday at 7:30. And for those of you who don't know, I commute back and forth to work. So for a meeting to start at 7:30, it means I probably won't get on the road till 8:39. But I never complain. The one thing that really I think irked me as a college student was when advisors would tell us like what was an inconvenience for them, even if it worked for us as students. And so I always said if I ever got the opportunity to serve in the role as an advisor, I would always do what worked for the students, like what benefited them. This year we have 67 Greek ambassadors, and so 63 of them can meet on Mondays. At 7:30. So why would I inconvenience them and make them switch up their time? It just wouldn't make any sense. So every other Monday, I meet with them, and I also, in meeting with them, have to go to a different location than where my office is located. So it requires me to switch up the route that I take home. So this past week, I was leaving the meeting, and on my route home, I noticed on the road ahead that there is a detour sign. And I noticed that the car in front of me was planning to keep straight just as I was so that we could make a left at the next light. And what do you know? The big detour sign, the car goes ahead and takes a quick left. And because really going right would be out of our way, it would be an inconvenience to us to go right because we would have to loop all the way around across the bridge. So the car in front of me makes a left, I make a left, and immediately when we made the turn, I thought to myself, I said, Brittany, I didn't realize you could turn down this road. And y'all, you want to know why? Because the road that we turned down was a one way. So the moment that I had that thought, the cars start honking, repeatedly. Like each car is just like honk, 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 honk. And so it was like, uh-oh, what do we do now? Now the car in front of me had enough time. I guess it had been extended some grace, but had enough time to merge off into a bank parking lot. So they were in the clear. I am still in the danger zone. And I look up and there is a car coming directly at me. So then I start honking repeatedly, hoping that that car will not only see me in the wrong, but then will also stop and give me enough time to merge off into that bank parking lot. And not just that car, but even the cars like behind that car. So I'm getting a little nervous at this point, but prayerfully, the car does see me. The car stops and gives me time to merge off. Now, the moment that I was able to merge off and be in the clear, it made me think that that's simply what a lot of us do when it comes to purpose and when it comes to like everyday life. So we're so consumed with trying to duplicate what we've seen or what has worked for others, that we dismiss what God is instructing us to do, and so we actually make it 10 times harder on ourselves when we're called to walk in this lane, to walk in purpose, because we're distracted by what our neighbor is doing. Now, stop playing follow the leader. One, because it's too risky. So think about all of the lives that I had put in danger. I even put my own self in danger simply because I was following the car in front of me. Now, the car in front of me would have been long gone had an accident occurred. And that wouldn't have been a valid excuse. It definitely would have been my fault if a wreck had happened or if someone had been injured. Like all of that would have fell on me. Simply because in that moment I wasn't thinking, and even after I made the turn, I said to myself, I didn't think you could turn down this road, yet I continued to do it. So it's dangerous Hey Krishna, it is so dangerous to begin to play follow the leader when it comes to your purpose and your lane, because now you've turned down a one way. And so now turning down a one way, playing follow the leader, it's like a backwards way of thinking. And that's not going to benefit you or benefit others. So you have definitely got to find peace in operating in the lane that God has called you to. But then you also need to be alert in knowing how to be flexible and make adjustments at the last minute so that you don't do what I did. Second thing, it's going to cost you in the end. So a lot of times when God tells us to, write the book or start the business, start the ministry, start the nonprofit, whatever the case may be, whatever it is that God has told you or instructed you to begin, a lot of us, right, we begin to operate on a level of fear, simply because we don't see ourselves as a writer. Like, I don't see myself as a speaker, but I know that that's a lane I've been called to operate in, and so that's where these Facebook Lives come in and helping me prepare for the road ahead and what it is that God is preparing me for now, and for what's to come. And so whatever it is that God has instructed you to do, like, you just simply need to be obedient, right? And just go forth and do it. And I know it's not probably going to make sense to you. A lot of people are going to say that you're not qualified. You're probably going to sometimes feel discouraged because things aren't going to line up the way you want them to line up. But you just simply need to learn to be obedient. And so if God says move, you need to move. If God says go, you need to go. If God says apply for the job, apply for the job. If God says to write the book, you need to write the book. So many of us are sitting on our talents and sitting on our gifts, and all God really wants us to do is to start, right? God is going to meet us right after, once we make that first move. God is going to make good, right, on us trusting him, right, and proceeding forward. So you need to encourage yourself, right, and just do what it is that God says do. I remember when it came time for me to accept the job in Tuscaloosa, and I was really just kind of on edge because, money talks, and the amount of money that they were offering, it was more, but when you took in like the cost of living increase and everything of that nature, to me it wasn't really going to be that much of a difference. But I knew God was telling me to take this job, even though it didn't make sense. And so I end up, right, taking the job, and got the job. And once I started working at the job, I was like, really, Lord, like, you took me from doing something that I loved, which was traveling and being on the road recruiting, to, sitting at this front desk. And I was like, I just don't see how this is connected to my purpose. And what I didn't know in the time is that God was simply positioning me to be set up for success in my next role. So as I'm working and trying to, work through some of my frustrations and being placed at a front desk with the title as recruiter, that was the interesting part. I was still a recruiter, but I was more so doing it from the campus tour side of things. And so I just couldn't connect the dots. It didn't really make sense to me. And God told me when I took that job that it was going to be temporary. Now, what I found out later on is that my definition of temporary and his definition of temporary were two different definitions. My definition was like 6 to 7 months. His definition was 1 week short of a year. 1 week short of a year, y'all. When you really think about it, a year, it's a long time, but it's not really that long. But to me, it felt like forever, because I knew that God was going to promote me and place me somewhere else. And I just simply wanted it to happen right on my time and on my watch. Well, what ended up happening is that while I'm sitting here and trying to, rush God, the position wasn't even created. So the reason God placed me there is so that I would be able to acclimate to the campus and acclimate to the university and become more knowledgeable about what it is that they offer to their students, so that when the opportunity came, right, I would be equipped and prepared for it. Now, see how that simply required me to do what? Operate in obedience, but also trust God in the process. And some of us, we, including myself, right, we struggle, right, between the two. We struggle walking by faith. We struggle having to trust God with the unknown, especially when God has given us a glimpse of our future or our next. So I knew that God hadn't just sent me to that job for that particular job, but I also knew that I was qualified to do much more than what I was doing. And so it was frustrating to me because just like everyone else, I'm like, Lord, here I am, like, use me. Like, I'm too gifted to be here, right? I'm too creative, too talented. And literally, God is trying to prepare me and equip me. Now, looking back on it, right, I can connect the dots and see how that job, me sitting at that front desk, was so beneficial in my role now, because literally, I'm doing the same thing that I was doing. So I'm using the same systems that I was using in my other job. I'm just in a different department now, right? But I'm still recruiting. So God literally, when I think back on it, like, God has been preparing me for a very long time for this role. And so it's so important, right, for you to not try to have everything figured out before you operate in obedience, because a lot of times that's when we miss God, right? When we're trying to make sure everything's lined up and that we connect all the dots and the money's right and everything lines up. But see, how does that challenge your faith walk? How are you, what level, what area are you having to trust God if everything lines up, right? If you have all the answers, it doesn't. So literally, I said all that to say that as all this is going on, my family is like, Brittany, like, are you sure? Are you sure you heard the voice of God? Are you sure this is what God has instructed you to do? Because it just doesn't make sense, right? None of this about the move and how God had opened up a door for me to work in one city, but didn't open up a door for me to live in that city. And that's a whole nother video for another day. But it was simply about me, right, in that sense, following God and doing what I knew God was telling me to do. And that's the thing. A lot of times it's not going to make sense to you. So how on earth is it going to make sense to your family, right? And a lot of times God is trying to use you, right, to show your family, hello, like, God is still making the impossible possible. Like, God is real. God opens and closes doors. And so God was using me to show my family, like, hello, I'm not crazy. Like, I knew exactly what God was telling me to do and when God was saying do it. And for a lot of us, right, we're so fixated on trying to please man and trying to please our family and trying to come up with answers and excuses to give to people, when simply our response should just be, God said so, right? And it's just that simple, right? And that should give you enough peace, right, to keep pushing forward. That should give you enough peace to not feel like you have to elaborate in detail in what God is doing with you. Like, a lot of times, like, God just doesn't want us to just witness the impossible being made possible. He wants to use us to show others that the impossible can be made possible. So don't miss, right, an opportunity for God to use you because you're trying to prove to your family or your friends or your loved ones or your significant other that this is what God has called you to do and this is why you're qualified to do it. Last thing, the third one. Hello, everyone. Hello, Jonathan. Hello, Kiara. Y'all are up kind of late. But last point that I want to make is it's just not God's will for you to follow those who have no direction into where they're trying to go in the first place. Like, here's the thing. I write, I use the blog, and I've been doing so now for the last 4 years. I love to write. But I recognize, like, this blog, right, it functions, it's successful because God makes it that. And God allows it to reach who it needs to reach. But it's nothing that I do, like, of my own, right? It's just like in the job that I landed, I had someone on my job this week tell me that another candidate's phone interview was better than mine. And it was so crazy because, in a sense, like, even though I got the job offer, that stung a little, right? That hurt. But God had to remind me, like, this whole time I had been telling people my truth. And the truth is that God opened that door. Like, it was nothing that I did, nothing that I said. There was nothing that I put on my resume. Like, it was just simply an opportunity that God saw fit, right, to bless me with. And it's simply, right, my level of faith, because I was believing God for greater. I was believing God for more when I was working at the job that I felt like I wasn't able to use my gifts and my talents on. And I felt like, in a sense, was becoming a waste of my time in regards to purpose, because I recognize, like, I've been working in higher ed now for I guess 4.5 years, but this is not where I'm gonna be forever. Like, this is simply a stepping stone that's preparing me for wherever God plans to take me next. And so don't be tempted to follow people in the way that they're doing things, the way that they run their ministry, or the way that they run their nonprofit, or the way that they even run their office function and flow at work. Like, you simply need to know that in the role that you're in, right, God placed you there. And He placed you there because you're more than qualified, and He is trying to equip you and prepare you for your next. So you just simply need to be obedient, right, and do what it is that God says do, how God says do it. Nothing about my life really makes sense, and so I have stopped trying to make sense of it. But I know a lot of people who look at my life, they're like, well, that just doesn't add up. And I'm like, I know. That's how God works, right? That's how God works with me. I don't know how God works with you and how He reveals things to you, but God knows that if I get too much of the details, I start to run with things. So God simply will just give me a glimpse of a thing, and then I have to operate with that. So stop playing follow the leader, one, because it's too risky, right? And you'll end up turning down a lane that God hasn't even called for you to operate in. Hello, Aisha. Wow, y'all are up. Hello, Miss Rena. Y'all are up so late. But it's just too risky, and you'll end up turning down a lane that God hasn't called you to. And that's when we become frustrated, because we're trying to function at our best in a lane that we haven't been graced for. And that's the danger zone. Because when in a lane that God has called you to, right, there's peace, there's grace, there's provision, there's just a sense of belonging, right? That's why you can see people thriving in their lane, because they belong, right, in the lane that they're operating in. When we start to operate in our neighbor's lane, or try to operate in the lane that our family wants us to operate in, my family has been telling me for a long time to get out of higher ed. Because in higher ed, you just don't make a lot of money. And let me not lie to you, I've tried. I have honestly tried to get out of working in higher ed. But you know what? God has not opened up a single door outside of higher ed. I mean, I've applied everywhere outside of higher ed, and God is like, for what? So it's simply me, like, learning to have a sense of peace, so that my family comes at me again, instructing me that I need to get out. That's the thing. A lot of times, right, if God has called you to something, so if God has called you to be a motivational speaker, you can try to run, but you're not going to get very far. Because you're only going to begin to have peace when you start to be obedient and operate as a motivational speaker. It's the same thing if you're a manager on your job, if you're a leader at school, whatever the case may be. Like, you can try to run, but if that's the lane that God has called for you to operate in, then I can guarantee you're not going to have peace until you begin to operate in that lane. And so that's what I'm doing. I have peace about where I'm at in life, because I know that this is the lane that God has called for me to operate in. And what I love about this lane is that I'm able to encourage and inspire other students. I was a first generation college student, so I sometimes can think back on the time where the stress starts to play a role, and how you become so consumed with all the activities that you're involved in, and that you just kind of start to, like, feel as if though you're lost and unsure, right, of where this is going. And so I love what I do. I love working with Greek Life. I love running the social media accounts. I love being the Greek ambassador advisor. I love doing all those things. But I recognize I'm not going to be doing all those things forever. Like, this is simply temporary. I'm here, I'm loving it, I'm being exposed to a lot of things, I'm being challenged in a lot of areas, but I recognize that God is simply trying to, again, prepare me and equip me for whatever comes next. So you let that encourage you. Second, it's going to cost you in the end. You know, this is just not the year to be playing games on any level. So you don't need to be playing games uh, professionally, mentally, emotionally, physically. Like, this is just not the season to be playing games, especially when it comes to your purpose. And if you don't know what your purpose is, like, simply just seek God on that and begin to pray and ask God to reveal it to you. And I can guarantee, right, God will. Now, be careful, because what he reveals, you may not want to hear. It may not be what you have your eyes set on. I never in a million years thought I would be comfortable speaking about my truth, yet alone writing about it. But I honestly, every time I write, I'm reminded of the level of freedom that I've obtained and how hard I've worked to get to this place. And I'm gonna do a video. I guess maybe the next video or two will be about the unhealthy relationships that I had placed myself in and what it did to me mentally, and how I lost myself in dating those individuals. And not because it was something that they were requiring, but it was simply me trying to prove to them that I was wifey material. And so, in a sense, I lost who I was. I lost what I was passionate about. I lost what it was that I wanted to do long term, because I was simply trying to support them and push them to pursue their goals. And I wanted to go wherever they were going to go. And so a lot of times I turned down opportunities because it didn't line up with his plan. Whew, that'll be another video for another day. But see how important it is to know what your purpose is so that you can thrive in that area. And it's okay to support your friends and support your loved ones. But if your friends and your loved ones can't support you in doing what it is that God has called you to do, cut them off for a season, right? You simply need to be where it is that God is positioning you, where God has graced you, what God has equipped you to do. And last but not least, it's just not God's will for you to follow those who have no clear direction about where they're going, right? That's the issue, and that's where our frustration comes, is that we're trying to follow people who are simply just out here winging it. They don't know where they're going. They don't know where they're going to end up. They're not even seeking God about their next or about their next set of instructions. They're not even operating in God's will. So now you're following someone who isn't even following, right, the voice of God. That's dangerous. So y'all be encouraged, be motivated. Stop playing follow leader when it comes to your purpose. Like, stop. It's dangerous, and it's going to cost you, and you just don't have that kind of time to waste in this season. God has called you to do more, to be more. Like, there's somebody waiting on you, right, to operate in obedience, right? So every time you run, right, from whatever it is that God is calling you to do, like, someone else is having to go another day, another week, another month in pain, right?